What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Paranormal Council, where we are down yet another council member this week. Again, last minute circumstances. So, guys, if you didn't join us last week, you're going to want to check out that show where Jen Stacy carried a lot of the show. I was on the road. I couldn't really participate much, but it was a great show. And we talked about psychology and paranormal and a lot how it related to investigating and things like that, where your headspace is, even as a leader, things like that. So you're definitely going to want to, if you haven't watched it, you're going to want to go back and watch that as well. Not right now. Watch this one first, and then you can go back and watch that. But tonight, don't go anywhere because we are going to be talking about psychology and paranormal again, but we're going to be going into some other sides of things like attachments and stuff like that. So you're not going to want to miss that. So if you're into that stuff, guys, click like and subscribe. You know the drill. We definitely appreciate it. It really helps to spread the show around. So let's get started. So, guys, Stacy, Jen, psychology and the paranormal part 2. What do you guys think? What do you got?
I enjoyed the
Well, I
conversation
mean,
last week for sure.
yeah, I mean, they call it parapsychology for a reason when you're studying the paranormal, because a large portion of it has to do with psychology. Um, your brain is a quantum computer. For all intents and purposes, it's a quantum computer. And because of that, your experiences, everything that you are sensing in this world comes through that, you know, meat essentially only has 23 watts of power at any given time. So it's a low power chemically based, but it's still a quantum computer. And everything that you know and perceive comes through that. It's, psychological.
Okay. So let's get into attachments and the psychology behind that.
They're absolutely related. I mean, you don't have one without the other, I don't think, because um, it requires a level of being open and accepting, um, and whether intentionally or unintentionally. And by doing that, you're allowing access to your brain, your emotions, your physical senses. Of course, we all know that the science of the brain, right? Your thoughts, your feelings, your physical, it's all interconnected. Um, so you really don't get one without the other. And that's why so many people talk about the importance of mental and spiritual preparedness before investigating.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't something that uh, people or hobbyists have come across. It is actually in government studies and government approved um, psychological battery tests. The MBTI, which is what the government uses at the FBI, CIA to profile people. Every government agency at the federal level uses that test when you enter. It's part of the entering process. They do a personality profile to see what kind of a person you are, and it is based off of Carl Jung's work, where he breaks up the personalities of everybody into 16 different groups. And in those personality tests, there's a large portion of them have empathy as being the main thrust of that particular type of personality. And empathy is where a lot of the spiritual side comes in, because you are constantly trying to open yourself up and feel the environment in which you're in and the people that are around you. um, One particular group that is really susceptible to it is in that 16 is called the INFJs. They are incredibly sensitive, and it stands for um, the I stands for introvert, the N stands for uh, um, I think it's empathy, the you have feeling, and then J for judgment. That type of personality represents 1% of the population, meaning that these empaths essentially have no off switch with their empathic ability. They feel absolutely everything, and they are, for the most part, miserable because of it, because they can't, because they're introvert. They they can't be in public very often because they feel everything that's going on. And most people who walk around are, let's be honest, a hot mess. And these people take it on themselves and think all of those feelings, are their own. They can't separate, distinguish between their feelings and those from around them. And when they go into a haunted location, they will instantly start to feel anything that's going on in the environment or had gone on in the environment that was traumatic, a murder, a suicide, even uh, things like the death of a child from infant mortality, things of that kind that may have taken place in the home. They take that on themselves and they get overwhelmed with these feelings. Psycho it's completely psychological, based off of the feelings that they're getting, and they have no control over it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you brought up empaths, right? Because that's a term that's thrown around in this field a lot.
Yeah.
Um, Basically, I mean, I've heard it assigned to people who walked in a room and went, "Oh, that feels different,"
Hmm.
and that could. And when you ask them about it, you press a little further, like, "Oh, it's cold here." Well, yeah, it's colder in here as opposed to outside. Yes. What
well, you,
more, And they'll say, "Oh, well, I got that, so I'm an
well, you have
empath."
the opposite end of the spectrum too.
Hmm.
Yeah, well, everybody's empathetic, almost everybody, to a certain degree. The exceptions to the rule are psychopaths and sociopaths. They have no empathy of their own. What they do is they mimic. They
Yeah,
look around and they see through responses that are going on. They can read a room really, really well. They're good at reading body language and micro expressions, uh, being able to determine what people are doing and thinking based off of those things, but they can't feel themselves. And often they think it's funny that they can trigger other people's emotions. It's humorous to them that people get so upset over something that they feel, being empathic, because they have no concept of it. It's like watching someone uh, slip and fall, or watching the Three Stooges, things like that. It's funny to them that other people's misery is so easily triggered. That's
yeah,
why nobody likes them.
Well, and if you think about it in the terms that some people can understand too, is like when you sometimes when you watch a good movie that's got a good psychopath in it, even somebody like Hannibal Lecter,
Hmm.
you know, they will, when he's talking to Clarice, he's like, describing um, like the way she looks, the way she acts, and like how she feels. Like he's reading her,
Hmm.
and things like that. And yeah, they don't have that empathy toward their subjects, but like you'll watch it in the movies where you have some good songs, but they will talk about and explain what people are doing in the room, or what that person's feeling and all that stuff, because they can read their physical attributes and all those things. They pay attention extremely well, and because that's like when you lack something, we make up for it in other ways, right? So if they
Hmm.
lack empathy, they're going to make up for it in their abilities to observe, or observational skills and interpretation skills, mimicking skills.
Yeah.
well, and on the other,
The only thing they fear is that they will have the consequences of what they have done, uh, showered upon them. For somebody to do to them what they have done to others is their biggest fear, because they know they've hurt someone else, even though they don't care about that someone else. They know it hurt, and they have no desire to experience that kind of pain. So it's the only thing they fear, is that you will do unto them that they have done unto you. Um, Other than that, they have no fear of anything.
well, and on the other end of that, label empathic spectrum, we also hear a lot of the term empathic being used in place of or to recognize somebody as a psychic. And there's psychic, there's mediums, there's different abilities within each of those, right? Those terms are so broad, but they're thrown around like they're everyday words. And when I've come across a lot of people that are like, "Oh, I'm empathic," and then you start to talk to them, and then they'll start saying, "Well, I'm a medium," and then you ask them about that, and they don't do the things that mediums do. They never have, and they don't understand the difference between being empathic or that it's even natural. Most people see that empathy as abilities or a gift,
Right.
as opposed to something that, unless like you said, you're a sociopath or a psychopath, that's normal. Everybody has that to some varying level, right?
Yeah.
And so it's used completely interchangeably. And what's a huge misconception in the paranormal field is all the people that are empathic,
Right.
and as seasoned investigators, even if you aren't necessarily empathic when it comes to the paranormal, the years of experience teach you to be, right? You learn over time and develop those skills. But I think it's important to talk about that a little bit too, because there's a huge psychology in that.
Well,
And
look at the
the
two.
dynamics with team members affects your investigation and communication and teamwork and all kinds of things.
I was just going to say, look at the two most common things that, like, you, you pretty much run into almost even just regular people that aren't even regular investigators. Like when you just talk to average folks, um, the two most common things that they will talk about is intuition and empathy. Like in like what you're saying, Jen, some people don't understand exactly what that means. And there's different degrees. Like, a lot of us inherently have intuition, right? We get that gut feeling, everybody talks about it. It's one of the most common things. We all inherently have it. It's just to what degree and to what you've sort of trained it and learned to associate things with it. Like if you develop your intuition, or even your empathy abilities, what does it truly mean to be, empathic, versus just walking in a room and saying, ooh, I can feel the evil in here. Like, and so all of a sudden, what, you're a medium now too? Cause you know, but like empathy is something we naturally tend to feel toward situations anyways. But again, to what degree do we develop it and then get into even mediumship abilities slash psychic abilities?
Right. And I think the
Well, nobody's
foundation of
ever.
that, honestly, is just you need to understand it before you try to develop it. And people often skip that step.
Yeah. No one's ever explained to me what evil feels like. I can tell evil a lot of different ways, but feeling it when walking into a room is, you know, a unique experience. I haven't. I mean, I can watch politicians and say that's evil, but you have to actually have somewhat of a philosophical or political science background and understand when a politician is talking evil. Uh, Walking into a room, the spirit that is evil. I mean, what are you sensing? Are you sensing hate? Are you sensing anger? Are you sensing fear? I mean, what are the emotions that go along as an empath that go along with evil? No one's ever been able to explain it because that's not an emotion. Evil is not an emotion.
Well, I think it's because I think what you have to do as an investigator psychologically is prepare yourself. Like we talked a little bit about this, or you guys talked a lot about this last week too, is where your mindset is when you're trying to mitigate confirmation bias
Hmm.
by going in open minded into these investigations. And part of that is when you go in, even if you're a seasoned veteran or not a seasoned veteran, when you go into a place and you sense quote unquote evil or negative feelings, things like that, when you sense dread, when you sense those feelings, one of the first things you have to stop is try not to label it as evil. Try not to label it as these things, and go to the first step and ask yourself, why? Why am I feeling this? What is this? Okay? Because that's what you're there to do, is to figure out, why am I feeling this? Like, because again, is it really evil? Or is it because something bad happened there at that location? Is it because there truly is an evil spirit there, a negative spirit, something that wants to cause you harm? Is it, these are things you have to dissect and get down to it and say, why am I feeling that? And then when it's all said and done, if you do a good thorough investigation and you finally uncover that there's an evil spirit there, then you can start to associate that feeling with the word evil. You can start to link those, so in the future, as you encounter that more often, you can say, okay, I felt this in the presence of evil, and you just make those associations as part of training your intuition. But that's what I do, is I try to clear off any um, confirmation bias, any preconceived notions going into a place, and start to ask myself why and what when I start feeling something.
And that's really important. That's excellent protocol. Uh, that's how remote viewing works too. Remote viewing, for those of you who don't know, was actually developed by psychologists, transpersonal psychologists at Stanford University and Stanford uh, Center, and spent millions and millions of tax dollars to create this program. And through psychology, they went through these protocols in order to determine what was real data as opposed to what was AOLs or analytical overlay, the creative mind and imagination making things up as it goes along. In that, remote viewing was discovered that the first 3 seconds of any impression you get is real data. Your thinking mind hasn't kicked in yet to start taking that information and extrapolating, starting using it as um, fuel for the imagination. So if you're able to capture that first 3 seconds of an impression and then recycle that over and over and over again, you can get real data coming through. And that you piece it all together like a jigsaw puzzle at the end, you have real good information and blind from a blind target. You don't even know what you're remote viewing. To give you an example, AOLs will kick in uh, when you give them an opportunity to extrapolate out. And if I were to suppose to you right now um, a data stream that said simply you are sensing a man-made structure that is surrounded by water, that is hollow on the inside, um, has people on the inside who have a very strong sense of patriotism to them. It has a long cylindrical tube that's coming out, and there's flame at the end of that, um, that is very prominent. Now, what's the first thing that came to your mind when I said that? Did you
The
draw a
Olympic
picture?
torch.
Did anything come to your mind of what I was talking about,
The Olympic torch.
Jen?
My flamethrower?
A man-made object that is hollow on the inside, has people on the inside,
Oh,
Oh,
a
very
hollow
patriotic,
man object that is hollow, that has people
surrounded by
inside.
water, people on the inside, very patriotic, made out of metal, uh, has
Statue
a
of
long.
Liberty?
Yeah, I would say a submarine.
Jen, you are perfectly right. That's exactly what I was talking about.
Wait,
Now,
I didn't hear the answer. What was
the
the
first
answer?
impression is usually a submarine or a battleship or something along those lines,
Oh yeah, that's what I said.
because the information that you get is interchangeable, but the target, you don't know what the target is. So the target could be either one. It could be anything, really. It could be the Eiffel Tower with somebody standing up with a torch in their hand. You don't really know. So you don't want to let AOLs or the assumptions control the whole session, because at the end it's going to be junk. You don't want to name what it is with a noun. You want to be descriptive. Everything's an adjective. If you smell dirt, you don't want to state the noun dirt. It's earth-like or earthy, things like that, because you may actually not be on this planet. You may be remote viewing Mars. You may be remote viewing something on Pluto or Titan. You don't know what it is that you're actually targeting. So the senses and the information is there. It's all throughout the universe.
Right.
But it's not necessarily relative to what you are experiencing in that moment. You're just pulling data down.
And to kind of bring this into like ghost hunting, for example, because I don't want to trip too deep into just remote viewing, because I want to save that for an episode. You trust me, viewers out there, you're going to see remote viewing soon. We're going to talk about it specifically, but relating to remote viewing, so to speak, and ghost hunting, I think what's important is when you're investigating and you get those initial hits of data, when you walk into places, when you get senses of things, trying not to second guess yourself, but taking that initial data and holding on to that so you can, reference that later.
Well, I think it's important too to realize that those things, for most people, come attached with emotion. So when you go to do an investigation, being able to kind of set emotions aside so that you're just dealing with data, for the most part, I mean, being empathic helps because you get a certain sense. But as soon as your emotions come in, if you don't have them very well understood and under control, right, you'll feel a certain emotion, but then it's very easy to attribute it to something incorrectly. Um, I'll just mention something that happened. There it is. My whole screen blanked. I was like, what?
Yeah, you were starting to get choppy, probably like what I sounded when I was on the road.
Anyway, I'll bring up something that my son was doing with the psychology thing. They got a bunch of kids together, right? And teenagers, and asked them what they feel and how many of them were angry. And oh my goodness, what's going on? Hear me?
It's your turn to have technical difficulties tonight.
Is it me having technical difficulties?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No reason to feel shame. It's
Can you
not
guys
your
not
fault.
hear me?
We hear
Well,
you.
I'm
It's just
hearing
choppy.
you. But no, it's okay. We did hear that, about they were getting all the young guys together for the experiment.
Yeah. And they asked how many of them were angry. And all these kids shot their hands up immediately. And that was how they described the emotion that they were feeling, right? They were angry. And when they started looking at it, anger is actually just this like umbrella emotion, right? It covers
Mhm.
fear, insecurity, grief, self doubt, betrayal, like so many different emotions that you feel in conjunction with it. And I mean, I know like I have a daughter, she'll probably be mad at me for sharing this, but when she gets actually significantly hurt, when you know it's time to go to the doctor, she will sit there and hold whatever part of her is injured, like her knee or her foot, and she will laugh hysterically. That's her reaction to her pain. But you know, when she's laughing hysterically, when she's in pain, it's time to go to the doctor. But the anger is this blanket emotion. So a lot of times when we're going to a place to investigate, you'll hear somebody say, "Oh, it's evil," or "Oh, it's I'm afraid," or "There's something dark here." Like Stacy was saying, it's all about how you describe it, right? There's all these words that we can use, like earthy instead of it's dirt, you know,
Right.
with remote viewing. But it's the same thing with an investigation. If you take those first 3 seconds of data that you get when you walk into a place, and your first reaction is, "Oh, that makes me angry," or "Oh, that feels so dark in here," that's good data. But if you don't understand how your emotions work and how you perceive it, and anything that you have from your past childhood or some past experiences that makes you feel like this is a similar emotion, all of a sudden you're going down the wrong path again. So if you can, the more you can do to separate your own personal emotions from the data that you're getting, while still recognizing basic emotions and being able to understand what that emotion looks like for you, the more accurate your data is going to be. But people don't realize how much not understanding your emotion and involving your emotions through empathy in investigations can actually sway your data
I don't
in the
think
wrong
people in
direction.
general. I don't think people in general understand how important a lot of things are in ghost hunting. I think people they it's very it's underrated when it comes to how in depth you really should be. You know, I think a lot of people look at more of a fun pastime or a fun hobby or something fun to do. If some people out there like, I want to go ghost hunting, and I don't think they realize exactly what the true challenge is, because when you see a shark in an aquarium, you
Mm-hmm.
know, if you jump in, there's a lot of things that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, there's a physical real threat there. I don't think people, they underestimate paranormal because they can't see it. They don't necessarily even believe it sometimes. You see a shark, you see the teeth, you've seen the movies, you've seen Shark Week, okay, on Discovery Channel multiple times probably. You know what they can do, you know what they're capable of. I don't think people they don't realize that in the world of paranormal, you really shouldn't just jump in the shark tank. But they still do it because they don't see the shark, they don't see the dangers, they don't see these things. So psychologically, they're just going in, oh, I'm just gonna go shooting, yay. And they just go in there, and then that's when you get attachments, that's when you bring home stuff, or
Mm-hmm.
you just walk into, say, like an abandoned building and there was satanic rituals being done, and you decide, hey, I'm going to keep something as a souvenir. There's things that you do you don't realize because maybe you watch certain kids on YouTube and you realize, oh, this sounds fun, and then next thing you know, there's people are acting different around the house, and there's a psychology involved in that too, when you have to realize, like, wait a minute, why are people acting a little strange or a little different or a little more, why are they acting this way, and what changed all of a sudden. So now you have to dissect all this and break down that, because these attachments, these objects, they can affect you psychologically.
Absolutely. The whole idea of attachments too, people do not get that at all. How that happens, how spirits actually do attachments. Movies represent it poorly because the reality is not as sexy as like some of these Japanese films where they show a spirit sitting on the shoulders or standing on the shoulders of someone, in a very creepy way with the face and the long hair draped over and all that. It's not like that. Um, but the real way that it does happen is far more serious. Uh, Largely because people are who don't know themselves, don't know how their own spirituality functions as either their chakra points, their aura acting as a protective shield. Um, a lot of times that's way out of balance. Most people don't have a perfect egg shaped aura. They've got auras that are more or less like a mood ring. It swirls from side to side, and there are huge gaps. in their aura that allows their chakra points in order to be attacked. Most of the time, the attachments, when they're trying to influence you, come in through the third eye. Now, the third eye is not really forward facing, it's reverse facing, because the visual cortex is in the back of the head, and you have a chakra point here and directly behind you in the back of your head. Spirits like to go into that one. That's the USB port, where they will tether their consciousness into that in order to influence not only your visual cortex, but your consciousness as well. Good spirits will do it to inspire you and to show you things and to communicate with you in an honest fashion. Attachments will use that as a sucking point where they drain energy from you. They like to go from your back, your heart chakra, and the back of your head. And when they do this progression, there's a book called The Book of Mediums by Alan Kardec. It's like 120, 130 years old. It was written by a scientist who actually became a medium by accident. And he approached the whole process of being a medium in a very scientific fashion. It's a dull, boring, dry read. I'm not going to lie to you. It's written by a scientist, but it has a mound of information on how all of this stuff works, broken down from a scientific point of view. And they use spirits in order to confirm his understanding. And he came out with this. He actually went to prison after writing this book because it was against the law in England at the time. It was he was in violation of the witchcraft laws. But it is the most popular book next to the Bible in Latin America. Spiritists use the Book of Mediums as their go-to to understand everything that's going on in the spirit world. Anyway, the idea that spirits themselves attach themselves to the back of your head offers you an opportunity to actually break that connection on attachments, because that's how they're attached. If you take a sweet smelling perfume, essentially, to act as like an agent, a sticky agent, it wipe the back of your head with that and flick it like you're flicking off cobwebs. It will break that connection, and they have to turn around and try and reestablish it. And that's a lot of effort on their part. They don't like doing that, because once they're attached, they're getting the juice. But once the juice is broken, it takes a lot to get that connection back again. So
You
you
know,
break that connection, and then they oftentimes just walk away.
we had Sean Carter popped in there. It was good to see you, Sean. Of course, Kitty Cat earlier. Uh,
Oh,
Sean
there he
was
is.
Sean had graced us with some on Paranormal Council in the past. Was a former council member and of course longtime friend. Sean's a good guy. So hopefully
We
you're.
should
I'm
have had him
glad
on
that
tonight.
I know. It's ironic because I was like, I should have sent him an email. He probably could have popped on tonight and popped in there. But
Hey, if he's game, send him a link now.
well, we got like 25 minutes left tonight.
I mean, we
But
still got half the show.
Sean, if you're
Oh
interested
yeah.
in coming back on the council for one of these nights, uh, hit me up. I'll send you a link. We have a running link in here now, so you can pop in anytime if you're interested. But yeah, I'd love to get Sean's perspective on things. Like I said, great guy. Uh, Always love hearing from him as well. So that's awesome. And of course, Kitty Cat was said, "We hear you, Jen." So
Glad somebody did.
no, we hear you for sure. But yeah, I know Jen, you wanted to add some stuff to we were talking about with the attachments and stuff like that.
Oh, I agree with Stacey, and like there's a lot of common things that we see. Um, oh goodness, where do you start? That's such a big topic with so many things, and I've just recently dealt with one that was not a good one. Um, And I don't want to share too much about that because it is a little bit on the private side. I respect people's private spaces and their stories for the most part. But that it's scary to me and how many people, we talk about enthusiasts versus investigators, right? They watch the shows or they hear from friends, and now it seems like everywhere you look, people are involved in the paranormal. They're going to public investigations, they're going to abandoned locations, and they're completely unprepared and essentially almost asking for an attachment. Invite, and some of them sometimes they're literally asking for it. I've been places and heard people just invite them to come home with them, and you're like, no, 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 stay here. Um,
Right?
and yeah, but Stacy's right. A lot of people don't understand how they attach. That you don't. A lot of the ways that I've seen people trying to get rid of them. I don't know where they got this information from. I
I
don't.
know,
I
right?
can never see it working at all.
Mm.
You cannot sage away an attachment.
Mm-mm.
You can't do it.
Well,
You can't light a candle and get rid of an attachment.
that's the thing with the
You,
sage too. People don't understand. Sage is something that is Native American. Native Americans sell it to white people because they think it's funny. The whole idea of sage, because there's two different kinds of sage. There's white sage, which is what you know white Americans like to buy, and then there's brown sage. Now, incense and sage work very similar. They have a very similar kind of component to them. You have frankincense and you have myrrh in the Middle East. In the Bible, it's frankincense and myrrh. They gave it to baby Jesus, the three wise men. Well, the reason for that was in the morning you burn frankincense to welcome good spirits. It's sweet smelling. To welcome in the good spirits and the morning rise, the rising sun. And at night you burn myrrh, which smells like ass, and that's to shoo them away. This because the pungent smells sends them away. They don't like it. Brown sage is the same thing. It smells like ass. And if you want to get rid of a spirit, you have to have something that is pungent, something that they don't like. You can use brown sage. I prefer camphor myself. If you don't know what camphor it is the active ingredient in Hall's cough drops. That medicine-y smell that people will
The
you smell.
burn, the
Yep,
mentholish.
the mentholish burny thing that is in the cough drops, or you go into old folks' homes that's all you smell.
mm,
Retirement homes is nothing but this camphor medicine-y smell. Well, evil spirits hate that shit too. They will evacuate. All spirits actually hate camphor. So you want to evacuate the entire place of spirits. That's how you do it. You cleanse an entire home by boiling camphor. You can get 5 tablets of that for like $4 on, a Walmart website or Amazon. They're really cheap, and they're really strong and really pungent. You just boil that, and it gets rid of all kinds of stuff. I used it during the lockdowns because it also kills viruses that are in the air. It's medicine-y for a reason. Airborne viruses can't withstand that acidic aspect of it, but it will clear a house of spirits like nothing else. These sweet smelling white sage. That's what they use. Native Americans use to attract spirits to their spirit walks and their vision quests and their sweat lodges. That's how they draw the spirits in, is with white sage. You can't get rid of evil spirits with something that attracts them. It just doesn't work that way, you know.
Yeah, I mean, and unfortunately, like a lot of things, if you go, most places will, they don't even specify. It'll just say sage, or they'll
Yeah,
just
it's
say,
white
"Oh,
sage.
bottles of sage," and it's like, so I just tell people, "Well, does it smell good or does it smell like ass?" So, they're like, "Well, it's not bad." I'm like, "You're probably
It's
attracting spirits then."
Yeah, frankincense attracts spirits. The sweet smelling incense attracts spirits, which most of the time is what people are looking for when they're, you know, talking to spirits and looking for blessings and things of that kind. That's perfectly fine, but attachments, they will not get rid of them. And if it does, it's only temporary, like cockroaches going into the corners of your house. You've got good spirits coming in and illuminating your home with the white sage. The dark spirits or the attachments don't leave, they hide. So you don't get rid of them. They're cockroaches. They come back as soon as the good stuff leaves.
I was gonna say that's exactly it. All you're doing is putting them into hiding, so it's hard to see them
Yeah.
and hard to realize that they're there, and you don't feel the effects. They lay low for a little bit, and then they just dig in deeper. So, it really you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot when you try to do it that way, making
Yeah.
things worse instead of better.
Yeah. Because
Um,
all you do is piss them off so they come at you even harder when they come back.
Well, there's that, but they also spend more time around you and they're paying attention. They're watching everything you do. They're getting
Hmm.
to know your weak spots. They're getting to know how to utilize them and how to access you on a deeper level,
Hmm.
all while they're sitting there hiding. You think about that quiet little kid in the corner that's always like playing their game, not paying attention. You think they don't know anything. And then 2 years later, they all of a sudden remind you of every word of your conversation. And you're like, what? Yeah, spirits do the same things, especially attachments that you try to use sage to get rid of. They love it.
Yeah.
They get annoyed because you deter them, but it doesn't get rid of them. But I think one of the things too is I've said it before. I know Josh has said it before. Like the more you investigate and the more experience you have, you get a confidence and you get a certain level. Like you understand your own level, your own capabilities. You understand your own blocks. You understand different things you might encounter. But eventually, we're all going to find that shark, right?
Hmm.
It's going to get us one way or the other, and we have to have abilities, tools, and people we can rely on to help us if we need it. But
And humility to know. So a lot of times pride will get in the way and you think you can take on the shark. And it's like, no, there comes a point where you need to call backup.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, you definitely don't want to be in that deep end alone. That's one heck of a fight, and it
Yeah.
will take it all out of you. But
Now,
if it can get the best of us, with all that experience and all that knowledge, it's going to get anybody who doesn't have it, you know, easily. Um, and being a big tough guy or a big tough girl, it doesn't matter. That's got nothing to do with it when it comes to this stuff. But
well, I was going to say, I think one thing that I want to talk a little bit about when it comes to attachments and things like that is I would like for people to be able to recognize when they have these attachments, whether they brought something home, whether it may be attached to them. I think it's important that we discuss the different signs that they could have or they may experience, and also the effects of some of these people. Like when they say like ignorance is bliss, when you have these people that are out there, oh, I'm going to go shorting, and they go out there and then they do bring something home, but they don't realize it. And what that may look like in their lives. And I want to start by saying, first of all, when you have an attachment on yourself, one thing you can look for is almost signs of like feverish, that kind of feverish feeling, but maybe you're not quite sick and you're just kind of feeling a little feverish, a little, what the heck, something's off. That's kind of a sign that I've noticed back in the past when I've had a few attachments onto me. It's not been often, and especially nowadays, lately, I rarely ever do anything like that. Um, but that's a major thing. And the first thing I always notice, as far as if I have something, if something gets brought to my home, um, the first thing I always look for is just paranormal activity in general. Like, is there things that normally, like, you live in your house, you know what it's like every day, but if something starts to feel off, that intuition starts to kick in a little bit, you're like, something just seems kind of weird. Maybe it's like cooler in your house at times, cold spots. Maybe you're hearing things. Maybe you start hearing some voices. Like literally, you start getting paranormal activity. That's a sign. Guess what? Somebody's there, and it's time to look into that. Okay.
Hmm.
Also, you may have a loved one, a roommate, somebody who knows, like in your house, somebody you live with, they might start acting differently. They might start acting kind of cranky at times, for no real reason, kind of snapping at you, things like that, and things that are out of character. Because obviously we all have our bad days, right?
Hmm.
But usually this is going to be things that are going to be out of character type stuff. And when you start seeing that, and they start making poor decisions, I've seen people literally spend 2, 3, 4 months that have had attachments that have um, just novice people out, dicking around at places, and then for 2, 3 months they make poor decisions. Their life is really going downhill. So I just wanted to point out some of these signs, because again, this is really important for you guys, for the viewers watching, to be able to start recognizing some of these behaviors and realize, look, don't always attribute it to just, oh, this person's maybe just having a bad week or a bad month or whatever. There could be something spiritually going on. There could be something paranormal going on, like attachments and things like that. So you may have to dig a little deeper, and maybe you find out that that person or whoever, maybe they did do something paranormal related not that long ago, and or maybe they, you know, bought an antique or something, and there was an attachment to that antique, or who knows. So I just wanted to kind of point out some signs. I'll let you guys kind of talk a little bit about that as well.
Well, there are psychological levels to this because an attachment's ultimate goal is full on possession, or what some cultures call mount. They want absolute control over your physical body or your instrument. And in order to do that, you have to essentially willingly give that up, or be worn down to the fact where you just don't fight back. And that's where the stages of the progression in the possession aspect take place. It starts off with fatigue. You're tired. Then you're not sleeping particularly well. You're restless. Your chemical makeup inside your brain is being messed with, and your incentive, your pleasure, your dopamine, your serotonin, all these things are being mixed around in an uncharacteristic way. So your temperament is short. You're not getting enough sleep. It moves into a point of obsession, to where it will continually bring up a particular idea or concept or person that is of interest, that you turn around and get really hyper focused on, tunnel vision wise, for good or ill. Maybe most of the time ill. You're angry at this person. You can't stand them. You don't know why they even exist. The way that they breathe, makes you want to tear your own eyes out. This kind of obsession that builds and builds and builds over time, uh, moves into the full on possession, to where they start taking control through that weakness to inflict damage on your target of obsession. It's a lot of times where you get the murder suicide scenario with husband and wife, or girlfriend and boyfriend. Um, One of the things that, if you actually look into it, a lot of the paranormal couples, even in the TV scene, there have been murder suicides at various points, and suicides for other paranormal investigators who use it as, not as a real investigative tool, but as a clout. They go in and they start instigating and terrorizing and being real kind of assholes to spirits, they turn around and will turn your life to shit. And these investigators end up committing suicide, becoming drug addicts. There have been more than a few that have become very popular and then fallen very quickly because of their bizarre behavior. And that bizarre behavior is the attachments. They never got rid of them. They never figured out. They didn't actually believe in paranormal. They just thought it was a way to get, famous. It was play acting, and it turned around and it bit him in the butt. Because it's a progression, and if you don't deal with it early on, just like any disease, whether it be cancer or tooth decay, if you don't deal with it early on, it's going to get really bad. And the
Well, I
paranormal.
don't think. I think that's really important that you're putting it that way, because people don't realize that there's a progression, but it does get to a point with, especially a negative attachment, right,
Mhm.
where they influence your thoughts so much and your feelings so much that it becomes almost a um, Stockholm syndrome
Mhm.
relationship, where you want them with you, you need them with you, you need to stay connected with them. Psychologically, you feel like they're a part of you and that you're somehow helping them and you're taking care of them, and now you have a codependent relationship to the point that they have influenced your thoughts and feelings so much that you don't want to get rid of it. And you continue to house it and harbor it willingly. And at that point, it's so much harder
Mhm.
to you get rid of it. And then you'll have these moments, these times, these days, because people don't understand that when you have an attachment, you don't feel it or have the results like 24/7, right? It's almost like they have sleepy time too, right? And so you can have an attachment and have a couple of days where you're just really tired, you don't feel good, you feel off, you just got it, you're not sure. It's like, okay, maybe I'm catching something. You blow it off, you have a good day, and then the next week your life goes to crap, right? But you're like, oh, I had a good day. I must have just been sick. I don't have an attachment. This is just life. But you still actually do, right? They don't realize that they're not going to feel the effects, and they don't. I've actually heard people say, "Oh, yeah, I went to a haunted place and I left." And do you have an attachment? No, no, no,
Mhm.
no. Nothing started flying around my house when I got home, and they're dead serious. Like they think
Yeah.
that if they have an attachment, they're going to have poltergeist activity, and that's not how it works at all. They start slow, they start small, they creep in there, they sneak up on you, and before you know it, you're best friends with them, and you don't want them going anywhere. And that's where, especially for investigators, we need to watch each other. We need to look out for each other. We need to speak
Yeah.
up
These
for
are
each
the
other.
these are the same people that freak out when they're around somebody who's having a cigarette. Oh my god, I'm gonna get cancer from secondhand smoke. They're really sensitive about that, but they're not sensitive about the spirit that is following them around and making them trip and fall down the stairs. You know,
Yeah,
they don't see that.
Well, as we start
that's
to
not
narrow
fun.
down, as we start to kind of narrow down these last few minutes of the podcast, I would like you guys to get into some tips to everybody about cleansing yourself and keeping yourself
Mhm.
spiritually clean. Whether I like to say pray to Jesus, or again you can do all the different techniques, but I want you guys to pass on some cleansing techniques. I'm gonna hop off here real quick. I'll be right back though, but you guys talk about some cleansing techniques. I'll be right back.
Go, Jen.
Mine's really simple, because I will never tell somebody how to cleanse. I have worked with so many people who use so many different techniques, um, and what works for some won't work for other people. It absolutely doesn't. I know a lot of people are like, oh, you have to have this crystal and you have to hold it in your hand, you have to rub it, or oh, you have to go ground with bare feet, you have to have bare feet, or you have to have sage, or you have to take a salt shower, or I mean, so many different things, right? Or you have to have a chakra realignment. You have to go see a Reiki master. You have to go do all these things to cleanse. There's different levels of cleansing. There's different needs in cleansing, and there's different things that work with certain people. So again, that's where we go back to know yourself, know your beliefs, know what works for you, understand yourself, and then do what works for you, because I can guarantee you what I do to cleanse is very rare. People don't do that. I don't use anything. I cleanse very differently. I don't. I can ground just fine with my shoes on. I don't need that, you know. Um, and so what works for me won't work for most people. But I'm open to and encouraging people to find their own and use it, because whatever works for you is going to be the strongest and the most effective. So, my thoughts.
I'm more old school. I was trained in the ancient shaman practices and things of that kind. So I'm old school on that front. One of the best ways to do it, to cleanse in the old school way, the shamanistic way, is to take a bouquet of flowers, like what's behind you, Jen, and hold the bundle, and then sweep your entire body front and back like a broom, and then snap the stems, throw them on the ground. It cancels it all out, and then you take the stuff and you throw it out your front door. Real easy peasy, and you can get a bunch of carnations at the grocery store for like $1.75. You don't have to spend a lot of money doing it. It's quick, it's easy, and you actually probably smell a little bit better when you're done too, because flowers have a tendency to leave their perfume upon you. So
Is
it's
this what Florida water kind of also does?
yeah, the Florida water does the same thing. That's a little bit more expensive, but it's longer lasting. You put the Florida water in your hand. It's basically rubbing alcohol with cinnamon and rose oil in the water, and you essentially do the same thing, but with your hands, with the rose water on your hands. You wipe and flick it off like you're covered in cobwebs, and afterwards you actually literally start seeing better, because your aura is usually carries all kinds of gunk on it from the whole world. I go into Walmart, it's like I'm a lint brush from everybody that's in Walmart. You come out feeling like you're covered in cat hair and lint and all this other kind of stuff from everybody that's been in Walmart. You cleanse that stuff off by flicking it off with the flower water, and you feel refreshed. And if you don't, you start getting a headache. That's the beginning of your um, obsession.
Yeah, I mean, guys, who needs Waverly Hills or Penhurst when you have Walmart, right? So, guys, I want to thank you all who tuned in to watch today's show. Again, if you're watching this on replay, please come back and keep coming back and watching. We're gonna have a lot of great episodes coming up. I'm super excited. We got a ton of subjects to keep talking about, and we have a lot of expertise. We're gonna have some more people on here on the council as well coming up. So we just have a lot, and I am so happy for that. But guys, thank you all again. Thanks, Jen, Stacy. Sorry that Chanel couldn't be here tonight. But guys, tune in next Thursday. We're gonna have another exciting topic, so stay tuned. And I think that's about it. Guys. I think it was a great show. So we will see you guys next week.
Peace.